And joining us now on the program, Tom Williams, board member and president of the Meridian Airport Authority. Good morning, Tom. Thanks for joining us on Middays.
Hey, good morning, Gerard. Happy to be here.
Yes, sir. So the first I got to tell you that when I was doing one of my cross countries, I actually flew over and landed at Key Field and got a sign off over there. That's a few years ago, but fun airport to land at, right there over 20. And
you bet, and a little bit of everything happening over here.
Exactly. That's the thing I remember as well. It's kind of a happening place. But May is Aviation Month, as we understand it. And so, what exactly do we think about and recognize during Aviation Month?
Yeah, 11 years ago, the Mississippi legislature recognized May as Aviation Month in Mississippi. And a lot of people that I talk to are always shocked to learn that there are 80 airports in the state of Mississippi. Everybody usually thinks 5 or 10.
Yeah.
About 20,000 people are employed in the aviation industry in Mississippi, either directly or indirectly. And it represents about a $2.5 billion slice of our economy. So that's a really big thing for Mississippi, and it takes a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, that is amazing, and you're so right about that. Those of us that are in general aviation, we tend to know about these airports and use them, but the typical traveler that's not involved in general aviation thinks more about commercial air travel, and they think about the airports that do host commercial airlines. And they don't realize just and how big a part these general aviation airports are of our economy.
That's exactly it. And the things they support, for example, down on the coast, you've got airports with multiple helicopters that fly the workers to the oil rigs that you don't think about, that most people don't think about. So many of these small airports have businesses and industry that are supported by general aviation. There's a company in our area that has 120 branches, mostly in small towns throughout the Southeast. How can they visit those branches efficiently? Certainly can on the airlines. Driving is not practical, but general aviation lets them visit multiple branches in a day.
No doubt about it.
Public aviation, the public airports in Mississippi, particularly the larger airports, do a lot to support military flight training, from Naval Air Station in Meridian, Columbus Air Force Base, the bases on the coast. And that's a big impact that a lot of people don't think about. So the passengers, while that's what aviation is generally known for, the airlines, is actually a fairly small part of a big operation in the whole state.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we should also point out to our audience, if they're not aware, that a lot of these airports are not controlled, meaning there's no control tower, there's no FAA controllers in the towers, and they are self-controlled by the pilots that adhere to certain procedures and protocols and done very safely, because it's all done in accordance with very strict procedures. And pilots are, it's as a private pilot, it's the closest I got to the military, because it really all stems from the military. It's where it all came from. And it's so incredibly well orchestrated and extremely safe, but a valuable part of our economy. As you've said, I know when I was in business, I had offices in the neighboring states, and it was invaluable of getting around and visiting my people and our customers and so forth. There's a lot of that happens every single day, and that generates a lot of commerce. As you indicated, I had no idea, Tom, 20,000 work in the industry in Mississippi.
Just over 20,000 in Mississippi. And that's going to be direct and indirect. So it may be the lady at the airline ticket counter. It's going to be the guy putting fuel in the airplane. It's going to be the mechanic that works on the airplane. And I didn't even mention the agricultural aviation in the Delta and the number of crop dusters and companies that support farming in the Delta, and as well as the trees, fertilizing trees and treating them in the rest of the state. It's a really big segment there.
Yeah, that's a good point. So no secret that the last couple of years with the pandemic have been a challenge for the aviation industry, for air travel, and it's caused a bit of tumult. I'm reading reports, Tom, that that airlines, while they're reporting that the planes are full, they're flying fewer planes and they're canceling lots of flights because they can't get people, can't get pilots, can't get other workers as well, which is, of course, a problem across the spectrum of industries. What's the latest on all that?
Right. And, when you take an industry like the airline industry, it was probably one of the hardest hit through the pandemic, and dial it back to nearly zero, operating very few flights. And in the process, those airlines trying to survive, laying off people or reducing workforce, and then you dial it back up pretty quickly, say within a year. It is a real challenge to do that because now you've got to recover those employees. Sometimes those employees need to be highly trained. You've got to get your recalled employees trained again and current because airline pilots don't just stop flying for a year and then get back in the airplane.
Right.
You got to get them back spun up, and it's a big deal. And the passengers came back faster than the crews could, unfortunately.
Yeah, so we're seeing that. So what's the outlook? Historically, commercial air travel, as in the airlines, have relied on the military to essentially train their pilot workforce. But reports show there are fewer of those coming out, and there are concerns about not having enough pilots to fly airplanes for the future. And as you're probably aware, Boeing is presently working on a pilotless airplane that they think will be around 2045, 2050.
Oh, let's don't get crazy, Gerard.
They're working on it, as I'm sure you.
Yeah.
I understand,
hey, Gerard,
but
for the fun of asking, how many flight hours do you have?
1,200.
1,200. Perfect example then. And I've got about 2,000, but I'm an old guy and I've been flying a long time to get to 2,000. So you had two or three things that happened on this pilot shortage. You had a lot of Vietnam era pilots who the airlines had plenty. They had their choice of former military pilots to fly the airlines. But with a mandatory retirement age at 60 or 65, that bubble started going away. And we didn't have a good backfill. But with about 300 to 500 hours of flight time, you could get into the cockpit of a jet, of an airliner, and start flying. And then there was an incident where they changed the minimum flight time to 1,500 hours. And when we hit 1,500, suddenly that cut out that easy path to 300 or 400 hours and then into your training ground with an airline. Suddenly you've got a big gap to fill. And it is, as you know, with 1,200 hours and how long and how hard you've worked to get there, how hard it is to get to 1,500 to even get in the door.
Yes.
So we've wound up with a real gap that they weren't prepared to fill, and we're just now starting to build the resources and abilities to do that. They've increased the retirement age from 60 to 65, so that allowed some guys to fly longer. But it's a challenge, and it's one that unfortunately was created by folks.
Do you feel like that, as was the case across so many other occupations, that a lot of pilots felt like, well, maybe I'll just push retirement up and go ahead and retire now, even though I'm not necessarily at an age where I'm not allowed to fly anymore? I'm okay financially. I'm comfortable with this. I'm just going to ride off into the sunset, or fly off, as they would do.
Well, they'll go find another flying job outside.
That's exactly right. I know. Did that happen, though?
The challenge there, I think it did, and I understand it happened pretty significantly during COVID. So the airlines have all these pilots, and because of the PPP loans, we're not allowed to lay off many people. But they have these high-paid pilots that aren't flying. So they have told those guys, look, we'll offer you an early out. We need to get you off our payroll. We'll help you retire. And so they retired several thousand pilots that here a year and a half later they really need back.
Yeah.
Those guys come in at the bottom of the seniority list.
Oh, exactly. I don't think they anticipated that we would return to getting on airplanes and flying around the way we are. I think they underestimated that, honestly. Tom, it's been a pleasure having you on the program.
You bet.
Exactly.
Take care, Gerard. It's great visiting
Thank you, Tom. Yes, sir. Appreciate it, sir. Tom Williams, board member, president of the Meridian Airport Authority, has been our guest here on Middays. We'll step aside for a break. We'll come right back.